What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Certain Point of View, second episode of the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power review here on the channel. But we are reviewing episode 5 today. No, 4. Episode 4 today. 4. My bad. I just came from a She-Hulk review, which that was episode 5. That's where I got that from.
And how did you like that episode?
I love that episode.
Okay, good. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I love that episode. I'm very much enjoying that show. But we're here to talk about Lord of the Rings. As you can see, I'm with my buddy Sean. Sean, how you doing tonight,
believe I'm doing well. I'm still in shock. I can't believe they did that again at a Lord of the Rings wedding.
Game of Thrones wedding.
Oh, damn it! There's so many shows. I don't know what's what. Maybe maybe here's the thing, Jake. We're currently we got 3 viewers right now. Shout out to Curtis, the only guy in the chat. Curtis.
Yep.
You're a good guy. I wonder if that's because this is your second stream in a row without the girls.
Probably.
Or because people just aren't interested in this show.
Maybe. You mean like our review show or the show in general?
The show in general.
I think it's the show in general, if I'm being honest.
Because it's super interesting, right? Like I know, like myself, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Oh, also Andy, go Andy. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I had kind of sold this. I started a podcast. And when I say I started a podcast, I should say someone else started a podcast and invited me to join. Which is usually what happens. I was telling Kevin and Brandon and Frankie, hey, you guys need to watch this show, especially Kevin, who's a big Lord of the Rings fan. And so is Brandon. And
they haven't watched it.
Kevin had seen the first episode. Frank hadn't seen any of it. Curtis brings up a really good point. Actually,
you could just clickbait everybody.
You know what? I'm gonna hold this point for a second.
You're good. I'll hold the fort down. I mean, he's not right. He's not wrong. I'll be honest. I don't think this show. I think the show is being watched by a lot of people, but I don't think a lot of people have interest in hearing things about the show.
So I went, I went to Sacramento.
You sure did.
And I bought 2 souvenirs. I bought a really cool absinthe print for my bar. And I bought these for Jill.
You got those in Sac?
We got the because you got that bitch in costume store in Old Town Sac.
Evangeline's.
Yeah.
Evangeline's is really cool.
Which these are like full on.
Andy, he is dressing up as an elf, kind of sort of.
These are like full on. Well, these are like full on like professional grade costume ones.
Yeah, you got to put them on and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but Jill has some like crappy ones that just slip behind your ear.
Question for you, Sully. Before we move on and everything, you recently made a switch to actual earphones.
I did.
What was the move on that?
It's mostly for games. And in actuality, I have my other ones hanging from my mic. Because the goal is when I do like podcast stuff, I'd rather wear, the buds.
Mm-hmm.
But I just forget to switch it, and
I was curious.
My professional audio setup. I'm halfway serious, right? Like I've spent a lot of time setting up all my. You have
spent a lot of time.
I've spent a lot of time and not all of the money I've made podcasting or streaming has gone back into equipment.
It's just a cycle. Yeah, it's a cycle.
So that's I can't say the same for Jill. But there we go. You had mentioned about the kind of feeling on this show, and I agree with you in this fact that I think there's a lot of people watching the show, but I don't think a lot of people are interested in hearing conversations about the show. No, and what sucks is like you had said on the Q&A last night that like, hey, you feel you feel like you understand the show more after having talked about it.
Yeah.
So this is what I was getting to, right? Like Kevin's a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
So is Brandon, and Frank, doesn't, isn't like diehard Lord of the Rings, but he likes Lord of the Rings like any, red-blooded American. And so we had set up the podcast, and Frank was still getting some stuff set up, and we were like, hey, let's go across the street to 7-Eleven so we can get something to drink while we're on the podcast, whatever. We got Slurpees. You can watch the podcast.
Watch the show, guys. Watch the show.
Scoundrels Inc. I don't want to
put
name
the link in the chat. I'll put the link.
And I don't want to name a channel because it might change next week.
I'll just put the show link.
Yeah, we may be re-airing the show on a different network, but
it's called the pilot episode for a reason.
It is the pilot episode on purpose. Yeah, I was very adamant. I'm like, this is the pilot episode. Let's let's make sure this works out before we commit to it, or at least commit to the format we were doing it in.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Because we're pretty committed. Frank was pretty committed on it. Frank did a lot of work to get that set up. But so this is why I want to do Whiskey Jedi more, because you and I could just sit and talk.
Just BS the whole time. Yeah.
I mean, we don't even to the point, Jake, we're I think people would be interested to just hear, kind of like I enjoyed the Q&A from you and Brian last night so much. Yeah. Because it was very intimate in an interesting way. It was very personable in an interesting way. Dude, Andy, I felt so stupid. I was I went on a rant about Tom Kane, and then remembered halfway through, oh no, it's Corey Burton, who also voices Cad Bane and one of the Chipmunks. But so Brandon was in the very Brandon way where he's he's so quiet and innocent a lot of the time. He's so I watched Lord of the Rings. I'm like, all right, what'd you think? He's like, I loved it. And I feel like this show hits really well for the diehard fans if they give it a chance.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it works really well for the average viewer, because Jill's hanging out with one of her friends who has the White Tree of Gondor tattooed on herself.
Oh, damn. Okay.
And she said she didn't like the show. But she only watched the first episode.
Yeah.
She said she didn't like the show because it didn't feel like Lord of the Rings. And I think that's fair. It takes a little while to feel like Lord of the Rings. I feel like this episode was kind of the
this one kind of kickstarted everything.
Yeah, which is a shame halfway through the season.
It almost felt like the first three were the what is it called? The epilogue. And then the prologue, and then this was the first chapter of what we're really actually getting into.
This was the first time we've had, I was watching another reviewer talk about the show, and he had mentioned there's no real inciting incident for this show. There's no real moment that kicks it off. That's hey, this is what kicks all the characters into gear. With Game of Thrones, that inciting incident is Robert Baratheon's death, or Jaime pushing Bran off of the tower. Mm-hmm. Sorry if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes of Game of Thrones.
It's over a decade old.
It's over a decade.
Get over it.
Yeah. Also, there's so much more in that show. But that's the inciting incident. It's actually, when I think about it, I don't really know that House of the Dragon has an inciting incident. Maybe it's the death of Jaehaerys when Viserys becomes king, and
I mean, there's been a few that you might declare as them, but there isn't really one that has solidified the actual real path of the show just yet.
Yeah, well, I think that I honestly think last night is kind of it. Well, I think I think that it's kind of a sum of. I had said before, Jake, that this show is going to turn into us reviewing both of these shows, and I think I'm okay with that.
Me too.
But it's and I don't mean to compare the two, because if I'm being honest, if I'm going to compare the two, I feel that rush of exhilaration when I watch Game of Thrones.
Me too.
Or House of the Dragon. But I'm looking forward to Rings of Power more. because I think this is my issue, and I kind of brought this up last week, was Rings of Power is not a traditional dramatization. It's not a story in the same sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a legend. It's history. It's, it's how did we get, it's a prequel, even more than the Star Wars prequels are, right? It's the lead up to, it's explaining how we get to the point we are in Fellowship of the Ring or in The Hobbit.
That and House of Dragon are both doing that.
Right, but House of the Dragon also has a complete story.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Dance of Dragons has a complete story with a beginning and an end.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It has something to go off of.
Right.
Got it.
Whereas this, like,
it's a blank slate.
This is kind of telling it's not a blank slate, like, right? Like, we know where it ends, but it's telling the story of a whole 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And condensing it down into a short period. And again, I fucking love this show, but I'm trying to figure out why the buzz around this show is not the same as the buzz around. Is it the lack of sex, the lack of violence? Like, I don't know, right?
After seeing the first 4, I think when we mentioned that there isn't really, we can call it some sort of incident or major moment or something that kind of like moves everything in the right direction. It doesn't feel like we've gotten there yet. It still kind of in a way feels like a lot of things are still being set up. And we're 4 episodes in, like you said, we're halfway through the season. And
that's fair.
And to this point, we haven't gotten to a place where we kind of see an end for, and I get it, like they have multiple seasons planned out. There's a lot of characters, a lot of story to tell, but at the same time, you also have to tell stories within just the seasons. And it almost feels like the season's going to end on a random note, and then we're just going to pick back right up with the next episode in season 2. It, like, to think that we're halfway through and we don't really have a clear direction on kind of where everything is headed for the next 4 or 5 episodes. It's an odd feeling. It's a very odd feeling because the best way to describe it for me is it all so far feels like setup. And I don't even know like what that setup is for really anyway.
Right. And that's yeah. So did Tolkien write a prequel novel? That's a complicated question. I want to tackle these 2 notes in the chat. Having Die Hard not understanding the locations, I'm going to tackle that right now.
I'll star them.
That's an interesting point. And did Tolkien write a prequel novel? I think that's important to talk about because that kind of gives us what this show is about, right? So this map I'm about to pull up is a bit blurry. This is a map of Middle Earth in the Second Age. So you have normally the Shire is over here. You've got the Misty Mountains right here with Moria or Khazad-dûm. You have Rohan is where this is. I can never pronounce this. Calendaron or Calendaron. And then you have Mordor and Gondor. Right.
Oh, you could see the symbol right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see the symbol of Mordor right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Gondor would be on this mountain peak right here. If you do not have, if you're not looking at if you're looking at this on your phone, you probably don't see my mouse cursor. But so when we see the start of the show, the beginning of that show is on the far west of this map. It's off the map, right? And then Gil-galad is over here in Lindon when Galadriel meets with Elrond and Gil-galad at the beginning. The Southlands are Mordor, and probably also Mordor and part of Gondor, I would say. And the hobbits are probably, we don't know for sure, the hobbits are probably somewhere along this river because that's where
you mean the Harfoots? The Harfoots?
The Harfoots, yeah.
The Harfoots, yeah.
That's where they come from.
So do you think what, because they moved in this episode, or was it last episode they
I don't know because if they change it from the books, in the books at the end of the last battle, Well, in the I don't remember if it's Elendil or Elrond. Someone gifts the hobbits the Shire. It is a gift.
You said that last week. It
is a gift to the hobbits.
Got
Now, let's talk about. There's one more location we haven't talked about, right? So we've got and Celebrimbor. I'm not sure where he is, but he's probably somewhere in this region. I'm not sure exactly where Celebrimbor and Elrond are. But this is Numenor.
That's Numenor?
That's Numenor.
Whoa.
All the way down south.
I thought
this island.
Oh.
The Harfoots are hobbits. Harfoots are a like proto race of hobbits. They're technically hobbits, but they're like the hobbits we see in the Third Age during Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are like a combination of multiple hobbit subspecies, basically. The Shire is like a melting pot of hobbits. So the hobbits we see in the Third Age are kind of a combination of three different hobbit subspecies, I guess. Numenor is here. There's one other thing.
I had no idea it was that far down.
Yeah, it's way out. It's way well, and this might not necessarily be the other thing too. These maps might not necessarily be accurate, right?
Mm-hmm. But close enough, like.
Well, maybe. I mean, this is the one released by. This map is the one that is released by Amazon. The Shire exists, but it's not called the Shire. It's somewhere in Eriador, give or take. Rivendell doesn't even exist yet. Neither does Lothlorien. It's
super strange because it almost looks like every single piece of land that we see in the Second Age no longer exists or is named differently.
It's named differently. One of the few exceptions are Endwraith is still named that.
Okay.
Eriador is still named that. Fordraith is still named that. And that's where that ice area was.
Got it.
Rune is still named that. Rune just means east.
So maybe just the things that were like heavily impacted get changed.
Yeah, and Linden still exists. So the Grey Havens are in Linden.
Got it.
When they go to the Grey Havens to sail west, that's in Linden.
Got it.
It's just less. It's a less important location during the Third Age than it is during the Second Age because Gil-galad has sailed west. And then the only really person of importance there is Círdan the Shipwright. And when the wizards come, Círdan the Shipwright kind of gives Círdan. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but Círdan the Shipwright is one of the ring bearers. He's one of the elves that have one of the rings. And when Gandalf comes to Middle Earth, he gives the ring to Círdan the Shipwright. The thing that's important about Círdan is he is there's a lot of things that are important about him. But like of note of him, of the only thing in the Third Age about him that's really of note is he's on the last boat to go west.
Got it.
He's one of the last elves to go west. Go west.
Got it.
So there's one other point. There's one other thing we need to bring up. In this episode, Arondir mentions he's from Belarian. Belarian is not on this map because Belarian has sunk into the sea. So let me see.
Like Atlantis sunk into the sea?
No, it would be like everything west of Idaho sinking into the sea.
Oh,
so this is this is a different map than the one I just brought up. It's just a different map. The one I showed was the one that
Amazon released.
Amazon is releasing. This is a more like Tolkien accurate map. So this red part of this map is Belarian, where he said he was from, and that all sunk into the sea.
Wow.
At the beginning of at the end of the First Age.
Wow.
At the end of, whatever.
And I see Numenor is still far down there too.
Yeah, Numenor is still here. And then Valinor, where we see at the beginning where the elves are from,
is
here.
Wow.
So
very interesting.
So yeah, there's your Tolkien education. The other question that we had starred was, did Tolkien
Hi, Jill.
Hi, Jill. Did Tolkien write a prequel novel? Tolkien, the first thing Tolkien wrote actually was the story of oh God, I get these names so butchered. Um, the problem is some Elendil. Is this in my notes? Did I write this in my notes? Because I had meant to.
I think you did. Yeah, you did.
Well,
Elendil.
no, I wrote
Maybe?
Elendil. So the other one is the light of what the fuck's
his father, right?
It will be Elrond's father.
Elrond's father. Okay.
I just need the name. Elrond's father is Earendil. The light of Earendil, which is what's in the file. So, what was I saying? How did I get stuck here?
We were the prequel.
Okay, the first story he wrote was about Earendil and his wife, which is his wife, whose name I'm not even going to try to remember. Turns into a bird, and Earendil gets a flying ship, and he becomes a star with one of the Silmarillions, one of the Silmarils. Sorry, that's the first story he wrote. Everything after was kind of him explaining the world that this all ended up in.
Got it.
And then he wrote The Hobbit. The Hobbit was not originally intended to be set in this same world when he started writing it. But as he continued to write it, he realized, oh, I'm writing this as if it was. So that's how it all kind of started. I just watched a long documentary on J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm a big old nerd. Eventually, he wanted to... when The Hobbit was a success, his publisher said, okay, let's make another. And he wanted to release the Silmarillion, which was this book of stories that took place during the First Age and the Second Age. And his publishers were like, what the fuck is this? This is a history book. Right? Like, this isn't a story.
Yeah.
So then he went and wrote Lord of the Rings, hoping to eventually publish the Silmarillion. He never did. The Silmarillion was after his death by his son Christopher. And Christopher's also published like a whole bunch of other things. Unfinished Tales. I think there's one called like History Middle Earth Part 1 and Part 2, or something like that. Something of Middle Earth.
Let's see.
And he's also released some short stories, like Beren and Luthien. That's a wonderful short story, and Beren and Luthien is it's a love story between a man and an elf, and the story is that's what's on his tombstone with his wife, is Beren and Luthien. So it was a very important story to him. Okay. I think I answered those two questions to the best of my ability.
Should we start talking about this episode now?
We should start talking about this episode. So, what's your big moments from this episode?
Well, it's obviously the stuff on Numenor right now.
Okay.
And seeing, I mean, there's a lot of important things. I think let me pull up his name real quick. The stuff with, is it Theo?
Theo,
the son who has this, what seems like the sword of Sauron.
It is something. Right. Yeah, I don't know.
A hilt of Sauron, maybe, of some sorts.
Some sort of dark power sword.
That's essentially stabs him, which is very strange. But
Var, that is 100% what I think they're pulling from for that. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I think the stuff on the Numenor is very interesting right now, just because we essentially see its end. Like, its end is in sight.
Right. Well, and that's where some of the like changes come in, because we'll get to this. I have some theories based on what we saw in this episode. They've really hammered home some of the theories we talked about last episode.
I love that they started this episode with the vision or like the dream, essentially
Yeah.
seeing it all come down. It was very visually like, okay, like we're in the thick of it now,
Yeah.
which is what I want to see from it. I do have a question though. That ball, is that the same
Palantir.
one from the Rings or the Lord of the
It's-
Rings, the movies?
Yes and no. It's the same type
Are there
of object.
multiple?
There's
multiple?
There are 8.
Okay.
There are
Because when I saw that the first, and I don't know which one it is, but I remember either Merry or Pippin
Mhm.
stealing it and then essentially like being in shock mode.
It's Pippin.
Pippin. And so I was curious if that was the same one or not. But I'm very curious.
No, it's Merry.
Very curious.
I always
Is it
get their
Merry?
names swapped. I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't even going to attempt to try to make sure I knew which one it was. So
I always someone in the chat will know and correct us. I always get their names swapped. It's not Dominic Monaghan.
yes, it's not Dominic. Correct.
It's Billy. Whichever one is Billy Boyd. It's Billy Boyd. Okay, so there are 8 of those, or there are 9 of those, and Numenor has 8 of them. There's one of them is back in Valinor right now. Numenor has the rest of them. So 8 Palantirs.
8 and it's Pippin.
So
the Seeing Stones. Thank you, Refism.
Yeah.
The Seeing Stones. Okay.
Yeah, they're called Palantir or Palantiri.
Got it. Okay.
One of them is in Valinor, back west. Yeah, see, Var, that was what was tripping me up. I'm like, it's Merry. Wait, no, it's not, because he says full of a took. Never mind, I don't know which one it is. So, which he says that one other time, he says that in the Mines of Moria, right? When he drops the
Sure.
He drops when Pippin bumps into the bucket and it falls into the well.
Oh, making the sound for the orcs to come. I got it.
And it wakes up the orcs.
Got it.
There are 8 Palantir. One is in Valinor, and then Numenor has the rest of them right now. But they said in this episode they don't know where the other 7 are.
Oh, so they're just laying around somewhere.
Yeah, they just know where that one is.
Wow. Okay.
I have some theories where the other 7 are, but yeah, that's the same object. We also saw something else in that room. We actually saw 2 things. We saw a sword, an axe, and a shield.
Is the sword the one that Aragorn?
Yes, the sword is Underil.
It's what's it called? The Flame of the West? Is that what it is?
Well, it becomes that's what they call it after it's reforged, but it's right now it's just Andoril. Eventually becomes Narsil, the Flame of the West, and something else. There's another name.
So some cool Easter eggs, but also like I'm wondering like, okay, if Numenor gets destroyed, someone has to take all that stuff with them.
Well, Elendil will take the sword, right? Wait, is it Narsil now and it becomes Andoril? Why bother changing the name of this thing, Tolkien? Why'd you do this to me? So maybe it's Narsil now and it becomes Andoril. I don't know. Yeah, so Elendil will get that sword at some point, which leads us to...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, after you. I was just gonna say, like, I feel like it's soon because it feels like they're migrating. They're leaving. And I could be wrong, but it almost feels like this is their final farewell to Numenor.
Well, okay, so this is where I don't know. I will let chat decide.
Okay.
All 7 of you in chat, you can decide. How much are you okay with us talking about what happens in the appendices and Silmarillion versus because this is my problem with this show, right? Like, I'm reading it like a legend because I already kind of know the basic outline of the story.
Yeah.
Right, but they're going to change.
And as someone who doesn't know, just as your co-host here, I'm okay. Like, if something happens in the show, I'm okay learning about how it either differs or its path, or if it's the same from what we know or what you know has been written so far. I'm okay with that personally.
So my theory in the books, well, in the books, there's 2 factions. There's the King's Men and the Faithful. And the Faithful are still faithful to the Valar. They don't hate elves. You know, all that. Elendil and Elendil's line are from that sect. and I believe so is Queen Mariel.
Okay.
Although it's kind of more with her, it's more complicated, which is what we're seeing in the show, right?
Mhm.
We're seeing she still has faith in the elves, but
She's hiding it.
she's hiding it, and she doesn't think that's the right thing for her people
Yeah.
until the leaves of the white tree of Nimloth fall, right? Which we know the white tree of Nimloth its sapling will become the white tree of Gondor. So we kind of see that here, which again, I think in episode 3, we kind of see her helping Elendil a little bit, helping Elendil and Galadriel when she puts Elendil in charge of watching Galadriel, right?
Definitely foreshadowing this episode.
Right. And totally foreshadowed this episode. We get Galadriel trying to talk to her and trying to say, hey, come help me free the Southlands. I think that this man in your dungeons is more than what he says. And then we see Halbrand kind of get his jabs in, like, oh, look, you got captured, right? She has that great I am a Tempest line, which seemed super corny in the trailers, but it worked a lot better in the show.
Yeah, when it's played out.
Yeah, when it's actually played out in full, it works so much better. And then they come to take her away to a ship, and it's Pharazôn and a couple guards, and she begins fighting the guards, and Halbrand stops Pharazôn from getting involved. What we know, and this is where, my theory about who Halbrand is, this kind of reinforced that.
So can you what was your theory from last week? In case
my theory with Halbrand, I think he's Sauron, right? Everything he's doing matches what Sauron does in the appendices and the story of the Silmarillion, and the story of the Second Age involves Sauron tricking Pharazôn and becoming Pharazôn's advisor, right? And that's what leads to the sinking of Numenor. So I'm pretty sure we've gotten a lot of clues with Halbrand. We see him smithing. We see him having an interest in smithing. He was one of the Valar under Aule the Smith, or one of the Maiar under Aule the Smith. Sorry.
And there isn't a character named Halbrand in any history of Lord of the Rings, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
But is there a character similar to him?
There's Aragorn. Aragorn is similar, right? Isn't he?
I mean, he definitely is. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he would. Yeah, he is.
They're trying to show, and I think that and this is where I'm not sure, right? Because the show writers could be trying to trick people like myself that know the story and making me think it's Sauron, and then we reveal later someone else is Sauron, right? We're 4 episodes in. We still haven't seen the shaved hair blonde elf.
Yeah, with the white cloak. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was my first guess for who Anatar was. And Anatar is the name. So in the Silmarillion, Sauron goes by the name Anatar and tricks the elves, right? He tricks the elves. He tricks them into making the rings. But he does that after he tricks the Numenorians, and causes the Numenorians fall. Well, when Numenor is sinking, very Atlantis style, Elendil and the faithful sail east to Middle Earth. But they also fight in a war against Sauron before that, which we haven't seen, unless
and it hasn't happened already.
Well, I don't know. That could have been what we were alluding to in the prologue of the show, but because of how they're able to use content and what they can and can't talk about, that might not be part of it. Because the result of that war is they take Sauron prisoner. But if Halbrand is Sauron, they already have him prisoner.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So,
okay.
Numenorians. Reefism. Well, they're humans. There's another name for them. It starts with an E. Numenorians are the. It doesn't matter. Numenorians. Numenorians are the superior men that get long life.
So after this episode, and it obviously hasn't happened just yet, but it looks like Elendil, Queen, Galadriel, and whoever essentially pledges themselves to protecting the Queen are sailing to the east. They're going to Middle Earth. Pharazôn and Halbrand look to be staying back, as far as we know at the moment.
Edain, thank you. The Edain.
And from what you're saying, just from the history books per se, this could be the last time that the Queen, Elendil, etc., see Numenor, because it could fall apart with them when they're gone.
Right. I mean, I my gut tells me that it won't.
Okay. It won't fall apart that fast. Like, there's no way they're going to destroy it that quickly.
Yeah. Well, my gut. Well, no, because it literally Atlantis style sinks into the ocean. Like what we see in the vision is its final.
Yeah.
Fate. Like that's what happens.
Okay.
And it depends how quickly they want to do it, right? Because we have this other hanging issue here that the show is called Rings of Power. We don't have any
rings.
There are no rings. Right. So
honestly, like, I think the last episode is going to be like a montage of a ring or multiple rings being made, and then it goes into the second season. I think that's probably what's going to happen.
Well, because that's the question, right? Sauron has to be there when the rings are forged. Sauron is there when the rings are forged.
Oh, that's cute. Okay, now that okay.
So that's the other puzzle piece, right?
And we only have 4 episodes left.
Yeah, we only have 4 episodes left.
That's so okay. Halbrand has to make his way to Middle Earth then.
If Halbrand is Sauron,
if he's Sauron, yeah.
Because they tried to make us think Adar was Sauron.
Yeah,
I don't think Adar is Sauron.
I don't think he is. He didn't give off a very Sauron vibe.
No, well, that's the thing, right?
From a non-Lord of the Rings fan.
But Sauron is a deceit. Like, he is a deceiver.
Yeah,
like that's. It isn't until he's defeated by Isildur that he becomes this more foreboding presence.
Got it.
Prior to that, he tried to solve everything with deceit and with trickery. Andy, I'm sure they've confirmed other seasons. I don't imagine that they would do this much setup if they only had one season. But again, they might not know, right? Here's the thing. This show's doing way better than Wheel of Time, and Wheel of Time has 3 seasons confirmed right now. So,
yeah, it's beginning filming in the next few weeks. Season 2 will be.
Okay, cool.
The scripts are written, at least for the first however many episodes, and they're going to start filming here probably in the next few weeks, they said. So,
yeah. So, but that's kind of the story we get with Numenor, right? Like, we see the white tree fall. The white tree begin to shed its leaves.
And the Queen is the only one that knows this. She's keeping all of this.
She's the only one that's seen the vision, yeah.
But nobody else knows that, like, obviously, that Numenor destruction is on the horizon.
Right. And as Galadriel says,
I'll star that for you, Sean.
Yeah, that's a good one, Var.
I'll star that.
As Galadriel says, which is the same thing she says when she looks into in Fellowship, when they have that the Mirror of Galadriel, which is that water basin.
Yeah.
She says it'll show some things that may not come to pass. Which is true of the Palantir too, right? That fate is not decided, right? It can be avoided. It won't be. I promise you, it won't be. But so she doesn't know for sure that that's going to happen. She thinks that by going with Galadriel, it's going to fix it. But what I think the show's leading up to is she's going to leave with Galadriel, and while she's gone, Pharazôn will corrupt the people that remain in Numenor.
He's always ever since I've seen him, he seems fishy.
You know who tell me this is completely unrelated. Tell me he doesn't look like an older Chris Pratt. Kind
He
of.
kind of does.
Yeah.
With longer hair and a big beard, he does. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I every time I look at him, I'm like,
Yeah.
he looks like old Chris Pratt.
He's definitely a sneaky SOB who has big plans. He's always given off that little vibe. He's very just kind of relating it back to Game of Thrones, like a corrupted hand of the king.
Well, they've
You know?
they've kind of sanitized his story a little bit. In the books, he takes Muriel as a wife forcibly.
Oh.
In order to basically become king of Numenor.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if he marries the queen, he becomes king.
For sure.
So they've kind of sanitized that, unless that's where they're going with the show, which doesn't seem like a very television Lord of the Rings thing to do. That seems like
that's more Game of Thronesy.
It's more Game of Thronesy. So I think they're going to avoid that just for, sanitation reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm most interested in the Numenor story.
I think so too.
We can quickly talk about like Durin and Elrond. I really liked Elrond telling the story of Eärendil, his father, right? Because I didn't think we would get that story.
Yeah.
And Celebrimbor talking about, I knew your father, and he got that same far off look, right? I really love the Durin and Elrond scenes, but goddamn, I don't need this much time spent on Mithril.
Yeah, it honestly it almost feels like they're making Mithril to be this, and I know that it is majorly sacred in a lot of forms, but it doesn't feel like it's that big of a thing to focus on.
Right. It is that is what causes the downfall of the dwarves is Mithril.
Yeah.
Right. But they're going at it so slowly because the whole reason we see Khazad-dûm in the state we do during Fellowship is because the dwarves delved too deep in searching for Mithril. We know that they make enough. We know that they find enough Mithril to make, at minimum, Frodo's shirt.
Yeah,
and I believe at least one of the rings is made of Mithril. Okay. So where's the rest of it, right? We know that this is what makes the fortune of the dwarves, at least the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. So why are we dragging our feet with this? I love all of the scenes we got with Disa and Durin and Elrond, and I love like Disa singing to the rock is such a great dwarf moment. But you're dragging your feet so much with this arc, and I wonder if they're dragging their feet with this arc in order to get Halbrand across the ocean to where he's important, right?
I mean,
like set up the characters, and then next season is when we deal with the actual Rings of Power.
It very much could be a season full of 8 episodes that really doesn't get anywhere. Like it gets somewhere, but you're right. Like there's a chance that all 8 episodes are focused on these characters to a point where when we pick back up with season 2, then they go, okay, it's time to go gung ho.
Yeah.
It's time to dive into the actual rings, etc. Because and now that I know that one of them is made from Mithril, which I did not know that one of the rings was made from that.
At least one of the Elven rings is. I don't know that we have that much information on the rest of them, but I know at least one of the Elven rings is made from Mithril.
So that one that Durin gave Elrond, could that be what makes that ring?
Oh, that's a really good point, Jake. Yeah, that's because
he now has that. So obviously he can go back to Celebrimbor. And give that to him. Because, like, look, honestly, I know Doran was like, keep it, like, it's yours. You cannot say anything. But, of course, there's, like, something is going to happen, obviously. Yeah, they're playing in the background. Well, all excited right now.
The thing is, though, right? Like, oaths in Lord of the Rings mean something. They're not, like, they have, okay, this is another complaint I've had about this show. Why isn't Galadriel magical? Like the elves. The elves. Okay, actually, before we get into that, we get that great scene of Elrond with the elven sight. We kind of get a perspective on elven sight and elven perception. That was super cool to see. Because we kind of know from, like, we see scenes of Legolas like looking off into the distance. But we've never gotten to see that in the same way. So that was super cool. But like, why is Galadriel so mundane?
Humanized? She's just
so
humanized.
Mundane, yeah.
I
Like,
didn't even think about that. You're right.
Some amount of elven magic, you know. But that is just an aside. It's kind of strange to me. Because elves are innately magical. Like, they're not, they're not human. That's the point.
Yeah.
Andy, I think it's so interesting that you say this, because I actually think that Elrond is the most spot on character-wise. I think that the difference is, what's his name? Hugo Weaving. Hugo Weaving's demeanor is so different.
He plays it a very specific way.
Yeah, but I also think Elrond is charming, right? Like this Elrond we've gotten is very charming. I do think that Hugo Weaving is also very charming in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. It's just because Hugo Weaving has that real deep voice, and this guy's kind of like a little higher.
It's a younger version of him. Like it's going to sound and look and feel a little differently. I think,
But yeah, so I don't know that the scenes we got with Durin, Disa, and Elrond, I thought were great.
I love Durin. I love him.
And with Durin Senior, Durin the Third.
That was a great scene too, to know that they kind of have a little bit of an ulterior motive, and they understand that Elrond is not obviously there just for friend reasons. Like, they get it. They're not, and they're making the dwarves. They're letting us know that the dwarves are a little bit smarter than they lead to be.
Right. Oh, and that's where I was going with this, right? Like, that oath means something, right?
Yeah,
we know that
100%. Yeah,
we know that, but I mean, like, in the world of Tolkien, when you make an oath like that, it actually does have power, right? And we know Elrond's family isn't miserable for the rest of their days. So, Elrond is not going to betray Durin or Durin Senior, because we know that Elrond doesn't live miserably for the rest of his life. But yeah, it's just a weird pacing to that scene. All right, let's.
Well, there's just so much going on. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to make sure everything is like top tier every single time. You know.
And there's so much going on that we don't even get the Harfoots in this episode. Just last episode or two episodes.
Was a lot of them.
Well, no, was it last episode we don't get any Elrond or Durin?
That was last episode, because it was mainly about the Harfoots and the stranger.
Right. So like that's kind of our thing. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, but that's for different reasons. That's for reasons with Lothlorien and yeah, I don't know. It seems oddly paced. I will say the stuff with Theo and Arendelle and Adar. Adar is
the Orcs leader.
Well, yeah, he's just such an interesting character, right? Like, there's some theories on who he is. I'm not as well versed on those characters to say.
They're definitely making him out to be the Sauron type.
Yeah, I think the theory that I've seen that I like a lot, he could be one of Feanor's sons. Feanor is Celebrimbor's either father or grandfather. I think father.
So he could be Celebrimbor's brother?
No, sorry. Feanor is Celebrimbor's grandfather. So this would be Celebrimbor's uncle.
Interesting.
And Feanor is the one that made the Silmarils. And they had to, like, they swore this oath in the Silmarillion. And so this is stuff that they won't get into in the show. They swore this oath in the Silmarillion, and oaths have power. And the oath was basically to get the Silmarils back. And Feanor and his line are a little bit power hungry, right? Like, they're not in like an evil way necessarily, but in a way that, like, They see themselves as above everyone because of what they can accomplish.
Got it.
That's why Celebrimbor wants to make this tower and the rings, right? He wants to live up to his line.
Got it.
I don't know that story well enough with Feanor's sons to say whether this one matches. But he's a super interesting character. And it puts so much depth into the orcs, right? And I think these orcs are super well portrayed.
Yeah, I think they're great. I love the storyline with Arondir and the Orcs. I love that storyline so far. It's really, really great.
Yeah, I'm digging it a lot.
Yeah, I'm interested in this Adar guy. What his ultimate goal is. I know that clearly, and I don't know if I'm like what I'm hearing is right, but it looks like they're essentially just in the early stages of building Mordor.
Basically, yeah.
They're just digging around these small little holes, and
my thought on Adar, he's probably just an opportunist, right? He probably isn't connected to Sauron at all.
Yeah.
And he's just a guy that's like, hey, I'm here.
Let's take advantage of what's in front of me.
Yeah. I want power, I can get power. Right.
Yeah.
And for the purpose of the show, he's just there again to keep our characters relevant. To make sure we have something for Arondir and Bronwyn and Theo to do.
Is that the name of the mom? Bronwyn?
Bronwyn, yeah.
Bronwyn? Okay.
I think.
Oh, here's an interesting point, Sean. Adar's armor is the same as Gilligad's. Gilgalad's.
That's really interesting. So he brought up Belarian and the river, and his armor has that river on it. That's really interesting. I want to look that up. Gilgalad. Or Gilgalad. Sorry.
Is it Gilgalad? Gilgalad, right?
Gilgalad, yeah. That's really interesting. In what scene? Because the armor I see here is different. Adar. Adar's armor had that river pattern on it. I can't get a good picture of Adar.
Yeah, there's nothing that's like brightened.
Yeah.
Bright or anything. Oh, here we go, Sean. This is actually a GIF. Let's see if I can bring this up.
Put it in here.
Yeah, let's see if I can bring this up real quick. Where is it? There we go. Ah!
And I want to. It's very easy to disprove the Tom Bombadil thing. By the way, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, it won't let me upload it. StreamYard's being dumb.
Well, share screen.
Oh, duh. Let's do that. Let's do that. If this is not too blurry.
Yeah, so because the one, the Gilgalad pictures I can find, it's not the same armor.
Let's see.
Because we really have two shots of Gilgalad. I keep saying Gilgalad and then correcting myself to Gilgalad. I believe it is pronounced Gilgalad. Because we have this one from Fellowship. We have this shot from Fellowship, which is completely different armor. And then we have this shot from the first episode. But if he has another shot where he has armor, I'm not familiar.
We haven't seen him in armor yet, I don't think, right? I don't think we've seen
there
him
might have been a scene with him in armor that I'm just not remembering. It's certainly possible. Then I can't find a picture of. But okay, so Tom Bombadil I had to look up the name because I know the translation, but I don't know the actual name. His elven name is Irwin Ben Adar.
Huh.
Adar,
Okay.
right? So
I mean, that tracks.
Irwin Ben. Well, it doesn't, because
Why?
Ben Adar means fatherless.
Okay.
So he is, and Irwin means eldest. So he is the eldest and the fatherless. He was here before the elves and the Valar. So we know he can't be the Meteor Man because he was already in Middle-earth. He was the first person in Middle-earth. He's an eldest. That's what I am. Tom remembers the first raindrops and the first acorn. He knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless before the Dark Lord came from the outside. That's his quote. So it's not Bombadil. I don't think. Because even Tolkien had said that Bombadil was there before everything. Which is a shame we never got Bombadil in the movies. Because he's such a weird character.
I wish I knew who you were speaking of.
He's this okay. He is I honestly, to someone who's not familiar with Tom Bombadil, like, to explain him, he's literally a man who lives in a forest with this beautiful wife. He's not in any of the movies. This is what he supposedly looks like. He's just an old guy who lives in the forest.
Love it.
And he is able to pick up the ring and not feel anything. He puts on the ring and doesn't turn invisible. Like, so he's like, he has these mystical powers over the forest. He's just a strange character that doesn't fit anywhere within Tolkien's story. But he saves Frodo and the other hobbits from the Barrow-wights in the Fellowship in the books, but he's not in the movie. So it's, you know, I don't know. He just doesn't really show up. He's kind of a weird. It makes sense that they didn't show him in the movies because he's so weird. He's just so fucking weird. In an interesting way. But
Curtis, you're right. Old Ben. You're correct. Old Ben.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Anything else, Sean, that we need to talk about?
Well,
specifically,
I don't think so. I mean, this episode, it's interesting because it kind of is the episode that kicks into gear, but at the same time, it's also like not a lot happens. You know,
the only big stuff that happened was the Numenor stuff. Like,
yeah, the Numenor.
We saw a little bit of Arendir, a little bit. We talked about the Dorn and Arendelle stuff, or not Arendelle, but
well, there is
Elrond. Excuse me. There we go.
So there is the fact that we do see the scene from the trailer of the bartender. I don't know his name. The guy that runs the tavern, grabbing Theo by the arm.
Oh, for next episode, yes.
And well, no, that was in this episode. He grabs.
Oh, you're right. It was in this episode.
It was at the very end. He grabs him by the arm and says, "You know, do you know the name Sauron?"
Yeah,
you know,
and he has the same mark of him and everything.
Meaning he's also used the sword.
I guess that's the one thing that we haven't talked about. Yeah,
the sword. I don't know what the sword is, right?
Yeah.
In episode 1, they talk a little bit about blood magic when they're up in
the tower.
Fjordwaith, or however you pronounce it. In the snow level in Hoth. They see like evidence of blood magic, right?
Yeah.
And this also looks like blood magic, right? The sword can only be activated by blood, but I don't know what that means or have any thoughts on that.
I mean, that's what the orcs and I'm already forgetting his name. Adar are after.
Are looking for. Yeah.
That's what they're totally after. So
it does sort of remind me of the ring wraiths, like the way it kind of like sucks in shadow. It's interesting. The other thing I want to point out, Theo's friend, whose name escapes me. Var, this is what I'm about to bring up. So Theo's friend,
the one that left him.
Yeah, the one that left him.
Mm-hmm.
He got cut by the sword in the first episode, didn't he? And drops it, or in the second episode?
I think so.
So he got cut by the sword and dropped it. And now in this episode, he looked a little sickly. He looks, which it could just be Machine Gun Kelly. Thank you. That's his name. He does kind of look like Machine Gun Kelly. That's pretty spot on. Fucking skinny blonde haired fuck Machine Gun Kelly. Yeah, I like some Machine Gun Kelly music, but still. He does he looks sickly, which a Morgul blade is what Frodo gets stabbed with on Weathertop in Fellowship.
You're gonna have to give me some context clues here.
Aragorn leaves to go like look for food or look for a trail or something, and then the ring wraiths show up. Frodo gets stabbed, and then Aragorn shows back up with the torch.
Got it. Okay.
Well, and then Frodo gets sick, so he has to get ferried off by Arwen. It's not Arwen in the books.
Yes.
So, a Morgul blade, it turns you into a wraith.
Oh.
It makes you slip into the lands of the unseen. It makes you basically become non-existent, right? At least to mortal, as far as mortals are concerned. So that is, if he is getting sick, that is evidence for him being being a Morgul blade, because he does kind of look how they were putting makeup on Frodo after he got stabbed.
Do you think he'll become one of the, what are they called, ring wraiths?
Ring wraith. Well, yeah, that's a different thing though.
Got it.
The ring wraiths have to have one of the rings, right? That's why they, ironically, I'm wearing a ring, but they turn into that because they have the rings. Someone who gets stabbed with a Morgul blade will also turn into a wraith, but they will not have the same ability to like move through the world. The ring wraiths can move through both the world of the unseen and the world of the seen. Basically the wraith world and the normal world.
Got it.
But yeah, it's super interesting. I don't know. This episode was good. I really liked it. I've actually watched this episode twice, and ironically, like, don't remember anything about this episode. But like a lot of it isn't sticking in my brain. But I've literally watched it twice.
Yeah. And you enjoyed it both times.
I enjoyed it both times.
Yeah.
I went to, because I got home from work Friday, watched the episode, and had to rush off to go meet Jill and Jane at Disneyland. And then came home and watched it again. Like, and both times I loved it. I don't know. This episode, I love being in the world, because a lot of people say it doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings. It does feel like Lord of the Rings to me. But the content seems to be lacking something.
It just, nothing is really happening yet. I think that's where kind of I'm at. I like the show a lot. I think it's really well done, but I just need to see it kind of like
evolve,
just push forward a little bit more, evolved. Yeah, I think I just need to see more from it, and more in closer spurts. Not like show me one good episode, take a step back. Show me one good episode. It's only 8 episodes a season. We're halfway done already.
How much do we get for House of the Dragon? Do you know?
It's either 8 or 10. Yeah, it's somewhere around. It's around the same number.
Yeah.
But House of the Dragon didn't drop 2 episodes at once. This dropped the first 2 episodes together.
Good point. Yeah.
So,
which, to be fair, if this show didn't, I don't think anyone would have stuck on.
The first 2 episodes very much felt like one big episode. It did. It definitely connected, which I am glad they dropped the first 2 together. I just hope that now that we only have 4 episodes left, that we kind of get into the actual story more.
Right.
And some reveals and some bigger scenes and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that the transition of them going to Middle Earth is kind of going to help that, push it forward. So.
Yeah. Which actually, I know we're trying to close out because we've been doing this for an hour and 5 minutes now. I actually thought this would be a quick episode. Whoops. The one thing I will say, right? Like, if we rush through the rings plot line, like Celebrimbor actually making the rings, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of story to explore there, but it's a lot of uncharted territory once the rings are made. So maybe they're taking their time, so they're not rushing into that. We don't want a Game of Thrones season 8 situation.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So, but I have more faith in this team than I did D&D for Game of Thrones season 8. So.
Yeah, and well, I just don't want to. I don't want to wait till season 3 to see the rings made. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know,
right. Well, I will say, once the rings are made, they mostly sit in a vault. Like, they don't.
And that's fine. But I think that the rings being made is kind of going to be like a transition for a lot of the characters. Like,
right.
It's going to be like an evolving moment.
Yeah.
And I don't need the rings in every single episode. I know that's not what happens, but
it's
I mean, it's like a catapult. You know?
The problem is there's a lot of stuff like we kind of need to get to a point where Middle Earth starts to look like the Middle Earth we know.
Yeah, like I need like war and stuff like that to start happening.
But even then, right? Like Lothlorien, where Galadriel ends up living,
got it,
doesn't even exist yet, right? Like, and that should pretty soon exist. Like Galadriel hasn't even met her husband yet.
Yeah.
You know, because here's the thing: Elrond marries Galadriel's daughter, who doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's part of this problem is like we're at a point where, we need some of that to happen in order for the story to move forward. Unless they're changing it, which is fine. But the story has to move forward. Yeah, Var, I totally agree. That was super reminiscent of.
I forgot that scene happened in this episode, and I really love that scene.
I love that scene. I wish it didn't use slow motion through the whole thing.
I agree. I wish the slow motion also wasn't as slow as it was.
Right.
It felt a very slow motion.
It was very Wonder Woman-esque.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah. But I mean, again, Arendir, it just solidifies that this dude is my favorite character so far.
He's great.
Badass. I love him.
He is the Legolas.
I love him. I think
show.
he's so great. I think he's so great. So,
but all right, Jake, let's call it. You got Thursday. You guys are doing a bar trivia.
We're doing bar trivia on the POV Patreon. It's Pirates of the Caribbean is what we're doing.
I won't be there.
You will not be there. We are doing the first 3 movies: Curse of the Black Pearl, Dead Man's Chest, and At World's End. All the links are in the description. You can check it out. If you want to join us, check it out. There's a lot of cool things. We're also doing watch-alongs and Q&As. A lot of new things coming in the next month or so because things are kind of transitioning.
I'm trying to push for a certain watch-along. I think it'll be fun.
No, we are. So we'll.
The problem is that one's not streaming anywhere.
We've done it before.
Yeah,
we've done it before. People are willing to pretty much rent a movie for $3 for something like that. Yeah. So especially if they haven't seen it.
And it's a good movie.
It is. Yeah. Well, I actually haven't seen it, but I've heard good things about it. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sean, what about you, man? I mean, you got the Twitch. You got the Star Wars podcast.
Well, Twitch is on hold, awaiting some things. But hopefully,
no announcements yet. No
announcements for Twitch yet. But I got a new podcast, Scoundrels Inc. with Kevin Smets, Frank Janish, and Brandon Hanna. We're talking about Star Wars next. It should premiere Thursday this week. Our first episode went up last week. It was a lot of fun. If you want to hear 4 guys talk about Star Wars and take jabs at each other for an hour, because that's really what it is, right? The point of the show wasn't to be. We're not trying to be Ken or Alex. We're trying to be, 4 friends in a room.
Yeah.
We're trying to be the Schmoes Know show of Star Wars, if anyone remembers that.
Well, and
show.
you're also one of the very few podcasts that I listen to or watch to that is all in person. So
yeah, that's the other thing too. We wanted to do in person. Andy, that's part of what I'm waiting on. There will be some more of that. I don't have anyone planned for the next one. I actually want to get Brian on there to do that. That'll be fun. But I just can't wait for Brian's questions on it. I know he will have the best questions. But yeah, that more of that will be coming. I have to get, the plan is to put those up on YouTube, edited and produced. So I need to figure that out. I'm I'm kind of working on some things that need worked on before I move forward with that. But that's the direction that my content will be going. Is the plan. And which is why I want to come on POV more and do Scoundrels Inc. so I can cover the rest of the stuff.
Love it.
And just focus my other stuff on that.
Love it.
But yeah, Scoundrels Inc. Next episode will be Thursday. We'll be covering Andor, which we will shoot it on Wednesday. So I will be up very late Tuesday watching all of Andor. But yeah,
What a time. What a time. I'm on Twitter, Instagram at Qui-Gon Jake, 2 N's. Someone else took it before I did. Apocalypse movies as well. Shut up, Sean. We're talking. We're actually fan casting what we think is going to be the Marvel's X-Men roster tomorrow, which will be a lot of fun.
Danny DeVito is Wolverine.
I mean, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I actually watched a movie with him today in it. But yeah, so here multiple times a week, we do a show on Sunday, and then Sean and I here every Monday talking the Rings of Power. To everyone watching, 5, 6, 7 of you, appreciate it. Love you guys. Stay safe. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll catch you guys next time, guys.